So we welcome you here. I'm introduce myself. I'm Dawn Edgerton. I'm the convener of the convening team who organizes all of these presentations for the Agriculture Working Group. Today, we're just really happy to have Karryn, another member of our convening team, to speak to us about and share with us some writings and have some discussion about the Village Storehouse. Karryn Olson is our facilitator today. She has an MPA and has worked for many decades designing curricula and teaching sustainability and permaculture courses for all ages in higher ed and at hands-on demonstration sites. She's now involved in supporting folks who do good work in the world to learn the foundations of entrepreneurship based in a regenerative paradigm so that they can thrive and sustain their innovations. Her higher aim is to steward a developmental process for localities to design business ecosystems that regenerate their place and their communities while creating meaningful work opportunities. Welcome, Karryn.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you to everyone who is joining us here today. As I'm sure most of you know, the Baha'i writings are really profound in the way that they center the importance of agriculture in the workings of the society and the community. And there's this concept in the Baha'i teachings of the village storehouse. And so today, I was thinking, the team was thinking that, since the ABS and the Ag Working Group with ABS is really about, improving our skills to contribute to discourse. I'm trying to move all these chat things around so I can see what I'm doing. I'm sorry. So since we're trying to improve our ability to contribute to discourse, that's really what the whole purpose of our inquiry and deepening and exploration together is today, is how do we understand the concept of the village storehouse? And then how do we talk to folks about it? So really what we're going to be doing is I'm not going to be presenting anymore. We're going to go over to deepening and consultation. And so if you have joined us more recently, you're going to see in the chat that there's a link to a Google Doc, which I'm going to put in the chat again. And that is for the document that we're going to use for deepening. And it is a Google Doc that it's viewable, not editable right now, but you can go up to File and then duplicate it and create your own file and therefore have it in your Google Docs. And there's also a PDF uploaded to the chat. Are folks able to see either of those? I just want to make sure everyone's set with those before we go into breaking out, and I'll tell you more about what we're going to do, just so you know. Feel free to speak up if you either don't see the Village Storehouse PDF or the Google Doc, or if it's not working for you.
I see the Google Doc, but not a separate PDF.
Yeah, it
Okay,
may have come
great.
in later. You may have come in after. You kind of have to put those. Yeah, there it is.
Let me drop it in again.
Yeah, because if it won't, anything that comes on before you get on, you won't see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my chat got huge, so it's hard to see everybody. So that should be in there again. And then anybody else who joins. So the way that I structured this is we have had a wonderful group of folks who actually dove into this question as a reading group. I'm going to share my screen again just so you can take a look at this. And we really went in depth into this question about the village storehouse. And so I took the quotes that we actually deepened on together in that reading group, and they are here. There's 7 of them. One is a newer one. Number 7 is a newer one that we didn't talk about when we were meeting as the reading group, but there's 7 of them. That's the point. And what I did based on our consultation as a reading group and some of my own thinking since then in consultation with this organizing group is here are some questions for consideration. So as you read through the quotes, again, there's 7 of them, and we were thinking, let's take 45 minutes in breakout groups to actually go through the quotes and really deepen on them. And these are the questions. These ones here are questions that would be wonderful to be actually asking and consulting about as you go through. So might want to take a look at them when you get into the document. And then the idea is if we consult together in these breakout groups, then we're going to come back and talk about what did we learn and how are we going to, how have we improved our ability to talk about this and engage in discourse. And then I would love to have these kind of larger group consultation also that kind of takes us to another level. So I'm just going to stop sharing and see if there's any other questions since I can't see you folks when I'm sharing. And then there are going to be breakout groups that you will choose. So I'll talk about those in a moment also, but let's just see if anybody has any questions so far. Everyone look good? We're set up with all we need.
Yeah, so the PDF and the Google Doc are the same thing, right?
They're the exact same thing, right? Yeah, and I'm just encouraging folks either to have the PDF or the Google Doc on your own so you can mark it up and that type of thing, okay? So I encourage folks when you get into your breakout groups to, really take a look at the questions and then choose which, if in 45 minutes, you might not get through all 7. Choose which, choose 3 quotes that you really want to go in depth in and talk through these questions. The rest of the quotes, some other folks are going to dive into. So I'd rather have us go deep and have a substantive conversation around the questions. And then have you feel like you have to get through all the quotes. Does that make sense? So my suggestion is go into your group, look at the questions, decide which 2 or 3 quotes you're going to look at as a group in order to answer the questions, and then go ahead and get started. And we have 8 rooms, and right now we have 38 participants. So that's great. You are going to choose your room. So I'm going to actually open them all. You'll see that they're named in like both geographic area and kind of like large holder farmer, kind of broad scale farmers. So kind of interest groups, ways in which you might be participating. And then there's just some extras. So if you're like, I don't feel like I fit in any of these categories, go to one of the other ones and let's just try our best to have like 4 people, 5 people in a group and not, 20 in a group so that we have a nice distribution. So does anybody need help thinking through which group to participate in? Or otherwise, I would say go ahead and go. We're going to spend 45 minutes. Does that sound good? 40 minutes. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to have a harvest out, of what were like some key ahas that you learned that you want to share with the group. Anybody who would like to take notes of what is coming up in your group would be fantastic if you would do that. Just because I think there's going to be a lot of good nuggets that we find. and I can actually create a master Google Doc that compiles all of that for folks who want to have
Right.
access.
Right, Karen. So it'd be around 2 o'clock that we'll meet back again.
Right, and I
2
will
o'clock
send a reminder to
Eastern
folks.
US time.
Right, so at the top of the hour,
Right,
we'll be coming back. Sound good?
good.
Okay, so go ahead and go to your rooms, and then I'll come join in on one of them.
Where are the rooms?
You should see them. You should have, it should say,
If you click on Breakout Rooms at the bottom, a box will appear, and then you can scroll down, and at the bottom, you'll see a list of breakout rooms.
Okay, thank you.
Did everyone see that? And so yeah, I guess you just click on the one that you choose, right?
I don't see any breakout. Where do I see it?
At the bottom, on the bottom of your screen, if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, hover over the bottom edge of your screen, and
I don't see any.
a bar will appear.
I don't know. I don't see any reaction chat. You know where chat
That's it. Right next to reaction is breakout rooms. Should be right next to it.
I don't have it.
Huh?
I see it and click on a room and it doesn't do anything.
okay, so I will take a look here and see what I can do to help those of you who aren't getting in to get there. So let me see. Roya,
Yes,
which room do you want to be in?
doesn't matter. I'm going to be in listening mood.
Okay,
You can put me anywhere.
I'm going to put you in room 7. There's 2 people in there already.
Okay.
Anybody else need help getting into a room?
Yeah, community gardens.
Great. Who is this speaking so I can find your name?
Deborah Vance.
Okay, Deborah, community gardens. And remember, now there's 7 people in there. I'm going to encourage you to actually leave the room and put you in another one because, or maybe not. Let's see what you decide. But we don't need a ton of people in a room. It's not about the community garden. It's how does this work in your local community? How might you make this actually happen in real life? So.
Yeah. So what you do to join a room, if you haven't, is you go find the one, like I'm looking at rural US. I hover over it, and to the side there's a number. And if you hover over the number, it will say join, and then you click join. And then it'll ask you, do you want to join? And you say,
So we've made significant changes. And how's your course going? You're in 2, aren't you?
Yes.
As much as we oh, recording just started. So hi, welcome back, folks. The group that I was in, we had great fun. And of course, we didn't get a fraction of the way we would have liked to. We'd like multiple hours on this. And I think that was the whole point, for us to be able to have a taste of what the reading group had a deeper dive into, get excited about the potentiality in these teachings and how they transform society. So I think what would be interesting to do is to take some highlights, and especially I'm thinking, those later questions around, what did you see? Like, how is this restructure society, especially compared to the way we're doing things now? What does this make possible that's not possible in the current structuring of society? What did you glean? And feel free to just either raise your hand if you know how to do that, which is usually by your name. I think you can raise your hand, or unmute and speak. There, Arthur, you've raised your hand, so please do go ahead and be our first speaker. And if you can't figure out how to raise your hand, I see Quanta's raising your hand, so I'll have you in the stack too. I'll try to keep an eye. And Bill Morrison?
In our group, there was a lot of discussion about one of our members living in a poor neighborhood where people lacked income, were elderly, were handicapped, and where she was having, to a sense, help to feed all of those who couldn't feed themselves in the neighborhood, and how they could get some gifts of food that would help could be distributed. But so we saw that, the charity was required. because this community was not taking on the responsibility for all of those who couldn't support themselves. And we see in the principle of the storehouse, there's a collection of wealth at the local level from all of those who generate extra wealth, according to how much they can give. And then all of those who aren't able to support themselves for one reason or another receive from the storehouse enough to meet their basic needs. So we don't have to depend on charity anymore. Even though that was sort of Abdu'l-Baha's example when he was in the Holy Land, he was feeding the poor in his neighborhood and taking care of the ill as well, because again, the system wasn't yet in place. But he gave us the principles to do this as part of our whole functioning as a community. Thank you.
Yeah, and a question that arises for me from that, we don't have to answer now, but just as a follow-up question is, how does that change society when you know that if you're incapacitated, you're taken care of, when you're elderly, if you don't have means, you're taken care of, your public health is all taken care of, and that's done on the local level with great attunement to the needs of the community and what's possible in the ecosystems that you live in. Christine, do you like to unmute? And then I remember I have this stack. I'll come back to you folks. Sorry, Quanta and Bill.
At the very end of our group, we didn't have a lot of time left. We read the short quotations by Shoghi Effendi, and he answered basically one of the question you raised before, what would be different, how, in our society if we applied these teachings, and the extremes of wealth and poverty would just not be there anymore. And that's such a huge problem today.
Thank you, Christine. Quanta, you had raised your hand. Would you like to unmute and join us?
Well, my input was that, Shoghi Effendi and throughout the writings, it's talking about how lamentably defective the current system is, both economically, environmentally, and in every other way. So we as Baha'is have to implement the teachings at the whatever level that we are able to, as far as the agriculture and economy and creating communities that way. But I think once we start talking about these subjects, from not just saying, we're all flowers in one garden, the waves of one ocean, but really, truly going to the nitty-gritty. And I think that's when the Baha'is are going to become visible and will get resistance and will get persecution, and that Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah and Shoghi Effendi spoke about. So right now we are in a honeymoon stage with our world, but I think once we become much more open about the teachings of Baha'u'llah from economic aspects too, I don't know, then maybe things will change. I don't know.
We were talking about some of the different difficulties that we have in the world right now. And Richard brought up a very good point of trying to really focus on the positive aspects and how to solve those problems.
One thing we talked about in our group is this whole thing about what is the spiritual development necessary for the producer. So, some folks maybe read the quotes where, what I as a farmer would produce would be transparently shown to the village storehouse board. What I earned, what I brought in, and what my expenditures are, so that my tithes could be figured out, or if I didn't know anything. And so, we started talking about, wow, what level of spiritual development is needed in myself and in my community and in the governing council, so that we can do that in a way that it's voluntary, it's not coerced. People now, we think taxes, how do I avoid them, right? That's the way it's set up for mainstream society. So I think that this whole question about what's the spiritual development necessary in order to be able to actually implement these types of systems is a powerful one. Anybody else, anything you wanted to share about highlights and like aha moments in diving into the quotes that you dove into about what this makes possible, with a new society.
Well, I mean, one of the obvious thing is that how different it is than our current system. That, when we think about economics and what economics is in the world today, in name, it's supposed to help everyone, so it creates stability in the world. But in fact, we don't have stability in the world. There's a lot of extreme. So it's for the well-being of all. And back to the thing about taxes, I mean, what level of trust would you have to have in order basically to show everyone your tax return? It's so extreme. We'd have to be developed so far beyond where we are right now, where we're all very kind of protective of what we have and always on guard. I mean, if you look at the development and all these security systems, like, it's just everywhere. We've developed this, arming ourselves against, anyone who wants to take away something, our property rights are a big issue now. So it's, cause for real reflection, I think, especially in the US with things going on the way they are.
Well, yeah, in the United States, we no longer have a progressive income tax, which would cover the negative income tax. So those two things that are implied in Abdu'l-Bah's writings have basically been subverted at least in the United States. We had it in the past. If you look at the New Deal, you look at the Great Society. But in the last 40 years, the tax code has been flattened. People that are in need are vilified. Entitlements to the top are okay, but not to the bottom. So there's and those are spiritual principles related to sharing. And what do you do in a society where more and more of the basic needs are produced by fewer and fewer workers? And then you talk like AI might take up 47% of the American jobs. You throw that in with Mitt Romney's 47% of deadbeats. 94% of us at some point are going to be deadbeats when people have a need to contribute. And that's implied in Abdu'l-Bah's writings. Everyone should be a producer. So the nature of work has to change. Work is not necessarily what you do to make a living, because the needs are going to be produced by fewer workers. So we have to reevaluate what work is and not just what an economy is. So, economy is a fiction, but it's also a human arrangement of how do you take care of everybody in your society. And people don't think in terms of families. Should your children starve because they're not doing chores because they're only 2 years old? So anyway, I'll stop before I start foaming at the mouth on a soapbox.
Thanks. Richard has his hand up. And then Paul, were you going to say something? Okay, great. Let's have you on stack. Go ahead, Richard.
I'm curious if anyone here in the group has experienced firsthand the Fundiac program that's going on in Colombia. I've read a lot about it. I've read lots of papers about it, but I haven't personally been involved, and was curious if anybody in the group here has or been intimately involved with anyone who's studied that.
Worked with the Fundiac methodology in the 1990s when I pioneered in Latin America for 7 years.
Is that Neil speaking? Just so we can identify you. So if anybody wants to follow that with Neil, you can. And another question was, does anyone know of anywhere actually applying this village storehouse concept that we could learn from? And so go ahead and type that in the chat if you know of anything. Richard, did you feel like you got to ask your question anyway? I don't think we got any answers otherwise, but did you have any follow-up? Anything?
I would like to know, because since we're talking about methods and principles to move from where we are to where we need to move through a process of consultation and community, to look for things that haven't been experienced and things that do work or don't work, or at least have worked in some places. I'm curious if that has been the experience with that exploration.
So you're looking for someone who's had experience with Fundayak? Is that, you're looking to connect with anyone who's been involved? Not necessarily on this meeting right now.
Well, I'm interested if there is anyone on this meeting, if through that learning process that they have implemented principles that have worked and are continuing to progress. That's specifically the question.
Because there are people who participate now and then who have been involved with Fundayak, but they're not on the meeting today.
And so I see some hands up, and I know Paul had unmuted himself. Is anyone responding specifically who raised their hand to what Richard asked?
Yes.
Give me a nod.
Arthur.
Arthur, great.
I have not actually been there, but I supervised a master's student who studied Fundayak in Honduras. So I had, my second-hand information. She's now a member of the Baha'i International Development Agency. So she's gone places with her knowledge. But I think when we look at the Fundayak approach, we have to remember that they're doing a lot to bring education back to what is relevant to the farmer, the rural areas, and not how to join materialist society. So it's a very important dimension of what Abdu'l-Baha is talking about. But we could not put into place his whole system of taxation when you already have governments that have their own system of taxation. It would be premature to apply those principles when you are competing, in a sense, with an existing government that is already doing some other things. So we're not yet ready to be able to apply all of the pattern as a whole, unless we reach a point at which government breaks down totally and we're back to reorganizing entirely at the village level. So we just have to look at what's being done, what's being learned in the context of the fact that it will take time for society to evolve to where we can apply everything that Abdu'l-Baha has implied here. Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Great. So Paul, you had wanted to say something, Sandra. A few folks were unmuted, and I muted you again just for the quality of the recording, but do either write in the chat or jump back in the queue. And Arthur, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or was that about that? Okay, great. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I think, some decades ago, the Baha'is often were speaking much more about world peace and, the global level. And I think what we were reading about this community storehouse and the local activities complements that very nicely, or makes it real on a very local dimension. So I guess I'm just saying that this has been a helpful conversation to revisit these writings with a couple of Baha'is from different countries to see some of the different dimensions where we could start to have conversations, not only about, peace among nations is important, but how do you build a community, and what does community life mean, not only spiritually, but materially? And this starts to uncover some of that aspect in a very simple framework.
Yeah, and I think that tying what you said and what Quanta said and other folks have, like if we say one human family, each being's created noble, this whole thing of each person should live in ease and comfort, and like, how do you make that happen? This is really where the rubber hits the road, and it takes it out of these kind of nice things that can sound like Baha'i platitudes, but that like people can actually see, like there's actually teeth in, the writings that actually make it happen, mechanisms for that. Sandra, and then Neil, and then we should probably start wrapping up.
So I'm just thinking about resources in my own local community that have features of the village storehouse. So in our group, we talked briefly about food banks and how churches and Baha'i groups and community groups are partnering with food banks food banks have some stereotype attached to them because, oh my goodness, if life is so bad you have to go and access food from the food bank, you know you're in trouble. But those things can be shifted. The food bank can become a place where food moves through to whoever has need of it. So food banks sort of have some of the aspects of a village storehouse. In our counties here where I live, Grey Bruce, Ontario, we have a United Way organization that acts as a clearinghouse for all kinds of resources related to making sure everybody has their basic needs met. So they help with housing issues, they help with how do you pay your electric bill, they help with housing, with food resources, with everything that relates to basic needs. So that organization in our area, United Way, has some of the features of a village storehouse. And as Baha'is individually and as communities, I think there are ways to get to know those organizations and partner with those organizations, maybe even serve on the board so Baha'i principles can be further brought into those dialogues. Yeah, so just looking around our communities to see what features of the village storehouse already exist and how to work with them, I think may be useful.
Great, thank you. Neil and then Geraldine, and we have the other Neil also. And I'm just dropping into the chat. You can chat to me if you would like, especially if you need to leave. What would make this deepening and consultation better next time? Were there questions that weren't asked that we should dive into? So you can let me know those or be thinking towards those for feedback for the group. And let's go ahead and hear from Neil Watley, what your question or comment was.
Just to follow up on Fundayak, what Arthur said was, just to follow up from Arthur's, Fundayak was and Ruhi were basically made at the same time, developed. They were dealing with entry by troops, and so they Ruhi was the spiritual aspect, and Fundayak was the science. And one of the quotes that empowered them to go ahead with the principles that they eventually developed in Fundayak was Baha'u'llah's quote, "The great being saith, regard man as a mind rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom." And when we did research, we did on-farm research mostly. So we always used, and this was Fundayak was developed in the mid 70s from the onset. I worked with them in the 90s. So we regarded two sets of knowledge. One was knowledge based on indigenous agricultural thinking, so the farmers in the local area. That was one arm of knowledge. The other arm was the knowledge from conventional agriculture and rural development. And we always, every action that we took, that's where I kind of think that methodology that we use now in all social action perhaps began was we always took action and then reflection, and the whole systematization of that process was carried out constantly. And then that the results of those on-farm research were taken and put into the SAT curricula. So they started a program from grade 7 to 12 because most people in rural areas did not have that type of secondary education. And so in the English class, pardon, not English, the social studies classes, the mathematics, the science, they would all be tailored towards agricultural concepts. So you talk about photosynthesis in science, you would look at crops. And one of the motivations here was to try and get a curriculum developed so that children in rural areas or adults taking these as adult education would tend to stay in the rural areas and not migrate to the city. So it's trying to mitigate urban migration as well.
And what I'm hearing, Neil, in what you were talking about is that the Fundayak process as it unfolded was very much informed in consultation, reflection, action, and the actual context of what is happening on the ground in particular communities. And so
Very
that
much.
is something we're all learning, right?
Very much so, with the farmers and the farm families, the farm women, everybody.
Great. Geraldine and then Neil McMillan. And by the way, this compilation is open to anybody. Use it, do with it, evolve it. Please, let me or anyone else on the Egg Working Group know how you evolve it so we can evolve it. And I will be evolving the Google Doc, and then, that'll be available. You can take it as a PDF. But if you want to see the latest after the feedback comes through, go back to the Google document that I shared. Thanks, Neil. Go ahead, Geraldine.
Mute here. Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, this is my first time joining this group, even though I've missed, other sessions, and I really appreciate it. So first of all, thank you very much for organizing it. One thing that I would be really interested in doing, I tried to private message some of the people I saw from Canada. I'd just be interested in following up some conversations with people who are living in Canada, because I really feel it's a conversation we're not having within the Baha'i community in Canada as a whole. I don't see it in any case very much, and I wonder how we could stimulate things a little bit more so it has a broader reach as part of our conversation here in Canada. So I'd love if we could in some way try and connect a little bit more with each other. Thank you.
So I'm gonna invite folks to drop your contact info in the chat right now, Canadians in particular, that want to connect with Geraldine, so that you all can grab that from each other before you go. And then we can have other regions also connecting, but I think that's a great idea. Neil McMillan.
Well, firstly, Karryn, thank you so much. This is an enormous service to this group and actually to the discourse. And I honestly think you should continue this, because what we're talking about here is not so much agriculture. We're talking about an economic system. The village storehouse is actually a financial storehouse. It's not a physical food storehouse. So that was it. I just feel that I would come on every month to continue, because we were only scratching the surface today, and we were getting such rich input from all the participants.
Yeah, if you're interested in doing this again, would you raise your hand and keep your hand up just so we can all see? It doesn't have to be ongoing forever, but can we see? Okay, there's a lot of folks that are interested, that are those of us left, the diehards. Great, thanks, Neil. Joe.
One of the things that came up in our group was working with interfaith groups. And I just turned off my, wait a minute. So I was thinking about the Hopi Indians in the Southwest United States. They talk about that land being their homeland given to them by the Creator. And if you look at that area of the world, it's not the most rainy place. And but because they live there, they have to rely on prayer in order to grow up the crops. And so my sort of oversimplification of the Hopi way is that everyone should plant a seed and pray it up. So if we encourage everyone in our community that we know to plant a seed, whether it's a marigold or a tomato, and pray it up, I think that would have significant ramifications in the world, especially on how you relate to the earth, because you're actually planting a seed and praying it up and connecting yourself to the soil and to Creator.
Yeah, we really learn that, don't we? Especially from the Indigenous folks that grace our communities. I think that the hands that are up from when we were saying, do we want to continue? So I'm going to just say, the whole idea was that hopefully we all got a chance to dive a little bit more into how this unique concept can show up in our communities, and to be able to talk with Baha'is and friends about this concept. And I encourage you to continue having these conversations, because I learned a ton in that consultation, and I'm sure we all will continue. Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Karryn.
Thank you, Karryn.
Thank you.
I just want to mention that I put in the chat, if you're not subscribed and you want to receive announcements, I put the website for the Agriculture Working Group in the chat, the email or the website address is in there. And I just want to mention that also next month, our next program will be on December 19th. Normally we have our meetings or presentations are the last Sunday of the month, but since December, the last Sunday is the day after Christmas, it may not be real advantageous to have one at that time. So we're going to have it a little early. It'll be December 19th. And our presenter will be Winnie Merritt. And we're, as some of you know, there's a new compilation on agriculture of the Baha'i writings, compilation of Baha'i writings on the subject of agriculture that's going to be coming out early next year. And so we're just going to have a little presentation and discussion about that compilation, kind of summarizing what are the major concepts in terms of agriculture, how the Baha'i writings address agriculture. And so we look forward to seeing you then.
Is that going to be at the same time?
Yes, it'd be 1 o'clock Eastern time. Yes, we
Thank you.
pretty much standard. Yeah.
And there was a question if the Zoom is always the same, because it can be challenging for some folks to find the email.
No, it's always a different link. It's kind of a security thing that we do a different link each time. We don't have registration, so instead of doing registration, we do a different link each time. So you'll have to get on the subscribe list. If you're having trouble finding it, sometimes what you need to do is when you subscribe, check the email address, take our email address and add it as a contact. And that way you'll be sure to see the email. And hopefully it won't go in your spam folder, but occasionally it may do that. But I don't seem to have any problem. But if you add it as a contact, then you're more likely to see the email. Anything else before we go? Any other?
Well, good from my side. If anybody wants to download the chat, usually we're in the place where you would type your message in. There's 3 dots next to the smiley face, and you can save the chat there. So
thank you so much. Thank you, Winnie and Dawn, for spearheading this. I know you guys started this in North Carolina. I'm so proud of you. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Quanta.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Aloha,
It was wonderful to see you and be with you.
Aloha.
Aloha. Great to see you, Christine. It's been a long time.
Good to see you too.
Thank you.
Thanks.